Hello everyone, welcome to the ACS exclusive current affairs session for the Prelims 2022. Today we'll be dealing with an important topic, that is Russia-Ukraine conflicts. A lot of news were discussed, there were a lot of editorial, there were a lot of articles were talking about the Russia-Ukraine conflicts, the background and different perspectives to the same issue. Normally, an aspirant will have a dilemma that how to handle with this particular issue, what kind of questions can be expected in the prelims. That's why in these sessions, we'll help you to how to study this particular topic or what to study on the Russia-Ukraine conflict for the prelims 2022. So in these things, we have to go through different perspectives, different aspects, different dimensions of the Russia-Ukraine conflicts. Particularly, our focus must be on the prelims preparations. One of the dimension, one of the area that we need to refer, that is the historical fact that is associated with the Russia-Ukraine conflicts. One is the World War II. You know that the Russia-Ukraine conflicts, if you check the background of this conflict, definitely we'll get to know this has a link to the post-World War conflicts, especially the World War II. So we have to refer to the historical fact with regard to World War II. What are the reasons behind the World War II, and what are the treaties that came up after the World War II, including the UN and many of the international bodies were formed after the World War II. So that's why the historical fact, one of the area that we need to refer is the World War II, the treaties associated with that. Then October Revolution is also known as the Russian Revolution because Russia as a country was frequently in the news. That's why the October Revolution is an important revolutions were like in the historical fact that we need to refer for our prelims. We can expect a questions on this area as well. Then Berlin War as well as the Cold War. After the World War II, we have seen that the Cold War era, where the US is one side and the USSR on the other side of the Soviet Union. And Berlin Wall was the symbol of the Cold War at that time. That's why this fact that we need to refer for our prelims 2022. And another area of dimension that we need to refer, definitely the international organization were like discussed in the news associated with the Russia-Ukraine conflicts. Definitely one of the organization is the United Nations. And we know that there are principles organs for the UN. There are specialized agency for the UN, like UN General Assembly, United Nations Security Councils, the International Court of Justice, then the bodies like other bodies of the UN, like the UN Human Rights Councils. And there were a lot of resolutions were like introduced in the United Nations Security Council as well as the General Assembly, and most of these resolutions were abstained by India. All these resolutions were like against the Russias and taking action against to take action against Russia, especially their invasion on the Ukraine. So we have to study the international organizations, specifically the UN, the institutions which are part of the UN. Then another institution that we need to refer is the NATO. Russia was claiming the expansion of the NATO was the major cause of their invasion in the Ukraine. So definitely, who are the members of the NATO? When the NATO was formed, what are the reasons behind the formation of the NATO? Along with the NATO, we have seen some of the articles discussed about the Warsaw Pact. So what is Warsaw Pacts? What are the significance of this Warsaw Pact during the Cold War? What were the significance? Whether Russia was part of it? Who are the other members of this Warsaw Pact? The significant and what is the current position of the Warsaw Pact or the members of the Warsaw Pact? Along with that, there was another organization was also in the news, that is the CSTO. The Collective Security Treaty Organization, again, is also led by the Russia and the other Central Asian countries were part of the CSTO. So we have to refer to the NATO, Warsaw Pact, CSTO, then the European Union. They were also discussed. This organization were also in the news in this particular context, European Union, then other organizations like G20, G7 also were discussed because G7, when Russia was invaded the Ukraine, the Crimean region of Ukraine in 2014, Russia was suspended from the G8 and later the G8 came to known as G7. And there were proposals in G20 also in order to suspend the Russia's memberships. That's why the G20 and G7 is also, and again, important international institutions or grouping that we can expect a questions in this year. Then again, Baltic state. Some of the countries are known as Baltic states. So which of the countries are part of the Baltic states, or which of the countries are known as Baltic states? So these things definitely we need to refer. And in particularly the map based questions can also come in our prelims. If you have checked the previous year question, you have seen that there are sometimes the questions can be with regard to the places in the news. Sometimes the questions can be about the seas, oceans, and their border countries. So that's why there were a lot of places, the international strategic ports or oceans or the seas were discussed in the news, particularly in this context. Like the Kyiv is the capital of the Ukraine. Then the Mariupol port, it is an international port located in the eastern part of the Ukraine, which is now under the control of the Russia, and they have a discussion or the issue over the Mariupol ports, and they also agreed to have a peaceful dialogue in order to ensure peace in those regions, the Donbas regions. In the Crimea, already the Russia annexed this Crimea in 2014. Kharkiv and other areas were in the news when the Indian medical students were trained in the Ukraine, and later India launched an initiative to rescue these Indians, medical students and other Indians who were trained in Ukraines. So these places mentioned in the news also are important for our prelims 2022. Then economic perspectives also, we know that when this war or Russian-Ukraine conflict has affected on the supply of the oil. So if there is a disruption on the supply of oil, it will have an effect on the oil prices. So it resulted into increase in the prices of the oil. So that's why we need to check on that facts. Then the organization like OPEC, OPEC Plus, all these are again another important area, particularly in economic perspectives. Then there was a news discussion on the inflation concept, like the stagflations. There was a discussion whether India was experiencing the stagflation or not. So when this oil price is also increasing, it has resulted into the rise of the retail and the wholesale price. Then it resulted into inflations. So whether India is experiencing one of the type of inflation that is called the stagflation. Stagflation is a situation where high inflation and high unemployment has been seen. That means a government or the country is experiencing a low economic growth, which resulted into high unemployment, which together with the high inflation. In that situation, we will refer stagflation. But later, the government of India denied this claim that India is not experiencing the situation of stagflation. But anyway, these are the part of our economic syllabus as part of our inflation module. Definitely, we'll have to refer for prelims preparation. Then again, with regard to external sector of our economy, in the syllabus is coming a concept like trade deficits, the balance of payment crisis, current account deficits. India is now experiencing the current account deficits. This also resulted because of the effect on the global economy. India is now experiencing the current account deficits. So what is trade deficit? That means export is low as compared to the import. Import is somewhat in the high, which the country is experiencing the trade deficits, which is part of the balance of payment. Then what are the components of the current account deficit? These are the facts that we need to refer for prelims. Then economic sanctions, US and other European countries were announcing the sanctions against the Russia. In this particular context, we have to refer the US federal law, sanction law that is called as CATSA law. This was earlier in the news in the context when India was purchasing this S-400, the system S-400 from Russia. So what is CATSA? This is the US federal law, which mainly giving a sanctions on those countries having transactions with the three countries like Iran, Russia, and North Korea. If any countries have any transaction, especially on the defense sector, definitely US will they will attract sanction from the US. This what was the major concerns of the India when we have the defense and the military cooperation with the Russia. Then the ruble currency was discussed in the news particularly. This is a currency of the Russia. So whether it is part of SDR basket or not. So what are the currencies included under the SDR basket as part of the IMF system? So in International Monetary Fund, there is a concept called we have to study about special drawing rights. So what are the currencies included under the STR basket? These things we need to refer for prelims. So these areas also we need to refer in this particular context, that means we can expect a question on these areas. Then if we go through the India specific perspective, that is one is the Operation Ganga. This is the evacuation program which is launched by India in order to rescue the Indian trains in the Ukraine when the Russia-Ukraine conflict happens. So India successfully rescued all of these Indians, especially the Indian medical students, through the Operation Ganga, and we have used the aircraft that is called a C-17 aircraft of the Indian Air Force. With this assistance, we could rescue all the the Indian medical students and other Indians who were strained in the Ukraine. And some diplomatic terms also discussed in the news. One type of diplomacy is the non-aligned diplomacy. When you check the Lashmikant polity, also you can see there is a module called as foreign policy. In that foreign policy, it has discussed the different principles that India is following in its own foreign policy. So one of the principle, one of the policy, one of the diplomacy that India still follow is the non-aligned diplomacy. So that we can also expect the questions on our foreign policy perspective or the principles including Panchashil, the significance of non-alignment movement or non-aligned diplomacy. That also we need to refer. Then in defense and technology perspectives, there was a news about the Kinzhal hypersonic missile. This is again Russia's hypersonic missile, and Russia claimed that they had deployed this Kinzhal hypersonic missile in order to attack the Ukraine. So the Kinzhal were discussed in the news. So we can expect which of the following country developed the hypersonic missile, which is called as Kinzhal. Then AK-203, S-400, BrahMos missile. All these missiles were part of or like Russia, India missile cooperation or defense cooperations. All this defense technology definitely we need to study as part of our defense sector, which is also a syllabus of our UPSC prelims preparations. Then in perspectives of the space science, International Space Station also linked to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. When the European nations, European countries were like attracting or announcing a sanction against Russia, in response to that sanctions of the European countries, Russia responded that if the European nations, if they do not lift the sanctions on Russia, they will collapse the International Space Station. This was the response from the Russia. So then we have to study as part of the space science, what is International Space Station? Who are part of this International Space Station? Russia is part of that. The European Space Agency is part of that. NASA is part of that. So other relevant fact we need to study about the International Space Station. Then another concept in the space sense, that is especially the sky laws, that is no fly zone, was in the news. The Ukraine president was approached the Nato and US in order to impose no fly zone, that no flight can fly over the above the Ukraine region, that is in order to prevent the war or invasion of the Russia, in order to prevent the Russia's attack on Russia. It was suggested, or the president of the Ukraine was sought an assistance from the NATO, the no-fly zone. So the fact about what is no-fly zone, those things also relevant for prelims. In this way, we have to study our this Russia-Ukraine conflict for our prelims 2022. If you study in a holistic manner on a different perspectives or using different dimension to the same problem, definitely you can cover a lot of things in one particular objective. So with this, you can cover a lot of syllabus, lot of content. So if any questions, if they ask in our prelims, definitely we will be able to solve. This approach definitely we have to take, and I will show you some of the model questions that the questions can come. I already told you the map based questions can also come in our prelims. You can see in this question with regard to some of the regions were often mentioned in the news. One of the Berdian Sac is located in the Ukraine. So if the places were mentioned in the news and the countries which are located, so the match the pairs kind of questions can be expected on the map, like the places or the regions mentioned in the news. So that's why we need to look into the map of the Ukraine. All the regions, all the places were mentioned in the news. And similarly, we can also expect the question with regard to the organization were associated with this context. One of the organization I have mentioned about the collective security treaty organization. This was a model question we have given to the students who are writing our prelims test series about the collective security treaty organization. And we know that the Ukraine is not a member of the CSTO. In this particular question also, it says the Ukraine is a member of the CSTO. So the basic fact definitely we have to study. Ukraine is not a member of the CSTO. That way the second statement is wrong. If the second statement is wrong, definitely we can apply the elimination method in this particular question, and we will directly reach into the answer, that is the option C, 1 and 3 only. So that means the first and third statement are right. So you can refer to this content. We have already covered this topic in the current affair classes, and if you wish to join, definitely you can join our current affair courses and the prelims and mains courses. Then other kind of question also we can expect on the members of the international organizations. In this particular question, a model questions, you can see that which of the following country or countries are not a member of the NATO, and we know that Ukraine is not a member, Belarus is not a member. So like this kind of question also we can expect in our prelims. So we have to, whenever we study the international organization, if you have checked the UPSC like pattern also, they have these tendencies for asking whether India is a member, or like whether this country is a member or not a member. So those kind of perspectives you can see in this UPSC pattern. So that's why we have to study about this organization and their members. And we also remember that Ukraine is not a member of NATO. So in this way, we have to study the content, and this is the way, that the smartest way in order to cover the important current affair topic for the prelims 2020. So these are the perspective that we need to refer in particular to the Russia-Ukraine conflicts. If any current affair that if you are preparing for the prelims 2022, if it has an holistic perspectives and different dimension to it, definitely we have to look into in this manner. So this strategy you can adopt for your preparations, not only the current affair preparation, but also you can use it for your static syllabus. With this content, if you study well in a different dimension, different perspective to the same issue of Russia-Ukraine conflict, definitely if any questions can come in, if any questions, if they ask in the prelims, definitely we will be able to solve those questions. So this is a strategy you must adopt while we covering the current affair topic, as well as you can adopt the same method for covering the static syllabus. With this perspective, if you cover like this, definitely you will be able to solve any of the questions if they ask about the organization, if they ask about historical fact, if they ask about economic perspective, if they ask about the India specific, the initiative which like we were launched in order to rescue the Indians trained in the Ukraine. So these areas, these are the perspective that we need to adopt while we cover in the current affairs subjects or current affairs topic. The same strategy you can also use for the coverage of the static syllabus. So this is what we are intended to give you an idea in this today's session. And with regard to Russia-Ukraine issue, we will cover in detail about this issue in the upcoming videos. And stay tuned with us, and we will cover the Russia-Ukraine conflict in the detail in the upcoming session. Thank you all.